So first off, I just wanted you to introduce yourself, your name, background, who
Oh,
you are.
okay. My name is Glenda
Mm.
Vincent Najee. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist. I am licensed to practice mental health therapy in two states, South Carolina and North Carolina. I run a private practice where I see individuals, mainly 17 and above, that are having challenges with depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD. I also have some responsibilities at the local community college.
Awesome. Awesome. So, uh, can you just talk about your background? Take me back to kind of before you started your private practice, before you started getting into therapy. Did you work any sort of like in business field jobs, type jobs?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I have a bachelor's degree in social work. Okay. I have a master's degree in counseling education, community agency counseling. But I started my professional career working at the Department of Social Services, and then I moved on and I worked at a dialysis center
Mm-hmm.
for about 10 years as a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the experiences that I had at that dialysis center changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had been working there for quite some time. I knew what I was doing there, you know, but I had a bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my company, the dialysis unit that I worked for, hired somebody that had a master's degree to be my boss
Mm-hmm.
when I had been helping other social workers with my bachelor degree, but they hired somebody that had a master's degree and said to me, "Oh, she's your new boss. We need you to train her."
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was a situation that changed my life
Mm-hmm.
because here I was doing this person's job. I was doing this person's job that they hired to do the job and
Mm-hmm.
then wanted me to train the person that they hired. It was almost like a slap in the face. And it made me realize that I needed more education so that I could elevate myself. And somebody would never come in and say, "Oh, because you don't have a master's degree, you really can't be doing this job."
Mm-hmm.
But here's somebody that does have a master's degree, and we want you with your bachelor's degree to train her.
Yeah.
It was it was a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went back to graduate school as a result. I know that was long winded. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. Do you think like I don't know, like do you think you being like a woman, specifically a black woman, had a part to play with them like
Oh, definitely.
mm,
Definitely. This woman was about 5'3", blonde hair,
mm,
really petite. And it was back in the early 90s.
mm,
So they hired a blonde that had a master's degree, even though I was doing the job with a bachelor's degree,
mm,
to be my boss.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Uh how do you think if you could go back and tell your past self, you know, Glenda Naji in the early 90s, um what advice would you give her in terms of navigating that type of world?
Mhm. I think back then we did the best we could.
Mhm.
My parents barely got a high school diploma.
Mhm.
They just told us to go to school or to get a decent job.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot of guidance. I think this generation of kids, your friends, y'all have a lot more guidance and
Mhm.
support. My parents, they just did the best they could.
Yeah.
Um, I think if I could really go back, I probably would have just gone straight to graduate school. Probably, even though I think my degree has definitely, I'm so grateful. It has served me well.
Mhm.
It has fulfilled me, not just in, emotionally, but financially. So I am grateful. But sometimes I wonder if I probably would have stayed in the same profession and just gotten a PhD, gone
Oh,
even
okay.
further, but started my advanced education right out of school. Because, yeah, right out of school.
Mhm. So, what we're talking about in this class, one of the main topics is what you call intersectionality. Have you ever heard of that?
I feel like I've heard the word, but I really don't know what it means.
Um, so the definition of intersectionality is a framework for understanding how various forms of social identities, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, ability, and more, interact and intersect to create overlapping systems of discrimination or disadvantage. It was first coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. An example of intersectionality is a black woman might experience sexism differently from a white woman and racism from a black man. It's basically like um just taking like a black woman is a good example because um they they experience racism and they experience sexism and it kind of intersects in one point. And I just want to ask you, is there over like your time and working, did you experience any kind of intersectionality?
Yeah, I did. I'm
Mhm,
thinking about one. I'm thinking this is a good example of that.
mhm,
I was working at the dialysis center
mhm,
as a social worker, and I don't know. I think he was like the director. One day I had got my hair cut really short.
mhm,
I can't remember his name because that was a long time ago. But
yeah,
he comes in and he goes, "Oh, new haircut." Now this is a white man
mhm.
with a suit on. He comes in and, "Oh, hey, Glenda, you got a new haircut." He said, "I'm gonna start calling you Glenn."
What?
And I didn't even think about that until later on that
Yeah.
that was not cool.
Mm-mm.
But that's an example of
Yeah.
I think that's
No, 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 no. That's a great example of that.
hmm
That's another thing we've talked about the course or throughout the course is in terms of how women present themselves, uh, how there's especially in corporate environments, there's this particular way you're supposed to look according to this white
yeah,
man's standard, and
yeah,
that's not really realistic. And who are we even doing this for?
yeah,
What
yeah,
like I should have the ability to wear my natural hair and not get looked at.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so that.
yeah. That's I'm gonna be completely transparent. I
Mm,
went through a phase where I felt like I had to manage my weight. I
mm,
had to relax my hair because because I was in a business of representing myself and
mm,
selling myself and my knowledge to help people manage their mental health.
mm,
And not until I became more mature, like within the last 10 years,
mm.
I was like, forget that. I'm gonna wear my hair however I want to wear
Yeah.
it. But there was this kind of look that would sell.
Mm,
Um, and unfortunately, I felt like it worked for me. That's
yeah.
the sad part. Like I felt like I got more clients, I kept more clients because my hair was straight. I had a look,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate
Yeah.
that I'm even admitting that. But
Yeah, I mean, I remember picking me up from elementary school. Your hair was straight and everything like that. I remember that.
Yeah.
I didn't know why. At that time I was thinking it was like a hairstyle. But yeah, that's something. We talk about how this idea of what you call Eurocentric beauty, Eurocentric beauty standards, and that's typically like the white for women, like white woman, skinny, um just health, like skinny is associated with healthy, straight hair, and like white smile, white skin is associated with healthy, um
Wow.
these certain things. And um white skin also might be associated with like smart and stuff like that, educated. And so a lot of times this stuff gets kind of played in our subconscious, so
Mm-hmm.
that we think, oh, I want my doctor to be white in order for me to get the best health care or the best care from my doctor.
Yeah.
I want my bank teller to be white.
Wow.
Like these certain things. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull back away from that and say, no, no, no. Eurocentric beauty isn't beauty. It's there's different forms and different shapes and forms of beauty and different looks and representations of beauty.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a major thing. And I I appreciate you for just even talking about that, because um it needs to be talked about more.
Mm.
Do you feel like there was ever any spaces where you could have conversations like this? Um, like just talking about like, hey, I'm in my job, and why do I have to straighten my hair to get more
Mm.
clients? Or why do I have to, when you're at the dialysis center, why do you have to not shave your head? Or like, was there
Or
any kind
cut
of,
my hair short
yeah,
and not be called Glenn because you think I look like a boy because I cut my hair short.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, I think if we take the initiative, we can have some of these chats, these talks in these spaces. I can remember the George Floyd incident.
mm-hmm,
I don't know if you remember this, but I gathered about 10 white women
mm-hmm.
from the soccer team.
Really?
Yeah, and we had a Zoom call about George Floyd and about how that made me feel and about uh, the text I sent out, the group text I sent out was, I want to have a gentle conversation on what happened with George Floyd and just race in America.
Mm-hmm,
Um, it was very eye opening for me.
mm-hmm,
I only spoke to two of those women after that conversation
mm-hmm,
because those women, they live in a totally different world.
mm-hmm,
Total. It doesn't mean they're bad people.
mm-hmm.
They just isolate themselves from what's really going on in America. And that was real eye opening for me.
Yeah.
Like, um, one woman asked, I don't understand why more Black women can't come to the parent teacher meetings.
Mm-hmm,
And I had to explain to her that they may be single parents, they may be working two jobs, they may not have transportation, they may not get home till 6:30. And then they have to cook and they may have to help with homework. So those are reasons why they can't get to the PTO, Parent Teacher Association meeting.
it's not just because they're black and they're lazy, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's usually what's under
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
question.
And I said to them in the meeting, I said, you guys know me, you know my kids.
Mm-hmm,
I said, we put our underwear and socks on just like you do. We live in the same neighborhood, so we must be making the same amount of money.
mm-hmm.
I said, so why is this? Why is it that my skin tone is causing all these problems? And then
Isn't it?
Tyler's mom went into, she got a black friend. story.
Yeah.
Bush's mom was over there like she was scared.
Yeah.
She couldn't say nothing. Um, it was really eye
They
opening.
yeah, they can kind of afford to live in this closed off reality.
A bubble.
Yeah, bubble. Like
Hmm.
bubble's a great word for it. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even have a clue.
Mhm.
Um, um, I forgot their names, but the one whose mom's a lawyer. Two of them, the mom's a lawyer.
Nate?
No, the one you went to Chapel Hill with. Ethan.
Ethan.
Ethan's mom was cool. I still talk to Ethan's mom.
Oh, okay. That's nice to
Um,
hear.
and Katie. Uh,
Hayward?
no, Katie.
Tala? No.
I forgot his name, but he was on the soccer team with you. But
Mhm.
she was cool. She was recommending books for them to read.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but when Tyler's mom went into the black friend thing, I wanted just to say, please be quiet. Just be quiet. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, keep going.
Yeah. So what kind of unique barriers do you think you've encountered as a black woman in your industry specifically? If there are any, because I know you have your own private practice, so
Yeah,
you kind of work
yeah.
on your own terms, but
I know at Central Piedmont,
mhm,
what I've learned over the years I've been there is just the good old boy system.
mhm,
And when black women have an opinion and they get a little riled up or a little bass in their voice,
mhm.
they're the angry black woman,
Yeah,
you know. Um,
yeah.
that's tough to navigate.
Because a white man can go raise his voice and look, it's just a white guy, it's just
Yeah,
a guy voicing his opinion, but
yeah. But
when
my opinion doesn't matter.
yeah, or
But you're white and you're not going to really look into what what you know
yeah,
what I've suggested or
how,
really
mhm.
look into it because you're just
You're in a bubble.
yeah, it's a yeah,
So, do you think for this bubble, do you think conversation is like the best way to kind of break that?
definitely. I think educating and having conversations about these things can help.
Mhm,
I think some people I think it can help for some,
mhm.
and I think some people are just who they are. And
Yeah,
once they show you who they are, you really need to believe them
yeah.
and move. eh,
Accordingly.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Move accordingly. Interesting.
Mhm.
That's fascinating. I had no idea. I'm still thinking about the Zoom call thing. I had no idea. Um, what like so in those instances where you felt like both racial and gender biases against you, how did you kind of navigate that? Like, did you just kind of have to ignore it, or put it in the back of your mind? Did you address it, or
When that director said we're just gonna have to start calling you Glenn, it really just I didn't believe it. I just kind of I didn't do anything with it. I probably was 27 years old,
in the
26.
'90s?
Yeah, I just didn't it made me feel some kind of way. I just was too young to really fully process it and address it.
Mhm.
And he was my boss.
So that kind of relationship
Yeah,
of
that that power parallel or
mhm. Do you think a lot of women experience that where they
oh
have
yeah.
this man boss who will say things and get away with things because they're in this position of authority?
Yeah, like microaggressions and stuff.
Mm.
Hmm.
Do you experience microaggressions at all? Like, have you?
I think I have over the years.
Mhm.
I can't remember specifically, but I do remember one time saying something to somebody like, "Did you just hear what you just said?"
Mhm.
Because and I've had conversations with like some other like professional friends, some of my friends
Mhm.
about calling it out and saying things like, "Do you realize what you just said?"
Yeah.
Just calling it out so that people start to realize that's not cool.
Yeah.
You can't go around doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
I remember one time I had this one instance my freshman year. There's this girl who I was cool with ish. It was this white girl, and I asked her. I was like, "Did you have you ever dated a black guy or anything like that?" She was like, "Yeah, I did one time, but then he like fucked me over, so I said never again." And I was like, I just asked her a simple question. I said, "How come the black guy only gets one chance?" And that really hit her, you know. But a
Mhm.
lot of people, they don't realize what they're saying.
Yeah.
They don't understand how they put back black people below the pedestal
Mhm.
in everyday speech and everyday life, and it's so ingrained within them that they think it's okay to say things like that. They have
Mhm.
microaggressions slip out um all the time. So I think I think something that will help is seeing more black people, more marginalized people, more people of color, more women of color in more positions of leadership.
Mhm. That's
I
true.
think that's one of the best things that we can do for this issue is have specifically women of color in leadership positions.
Yeah.
Um and
But here's the thing.
uh
A lot of times, even when black women are in leadership positions, their bosses
I still
are still white men.
mhm, yeah. And I know cuz when you kind of trace when you have conversations and trace the root problem, you can always get left with a sense of helplessness, like you can't do anything.
Yeah.
That white man with all the money controls the world and will always control the world.
Mhm.
um but I still think even though her boss is a white man, still her being in that position of power is still a good first step.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
I agree with that. And you never know what seeds you're planting through
exactly.
just good conversations and
Hmm.
just you never know what seeds you're planting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why I think it's important to have people of color, Indian, like Latina, like
Yeah.
whatever,
Like a
like
multicultural at the table kind of thing.
re- representation.
Yeah.
I think,
Mhm.
and growing up, like, and I know you had me in a world where there was not representation. There's not representation. There's way more representation now. Um, but like I've always thought that that's one of the theories behind why my name is Zachary was that it was like it would look better on job
Yeah.
resumes and job
Yeah.
interviews.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
which shows
We
how.
were strategic about that.
Hmm.
And we gave you the name Steven.
For my middle name, Zach Steven. But it's
Oh, so sad about that now. Oh my goodness. And you're filming this.
not fine. It's fine. Um, but that kind of just shows you, but that shows you the time in which we are growing up in, to the point that I'm actually gonna name my son something more Eurocentric so that he'll have an easier time getting a job. And that just
Or neutral.
or mhm. He'll have a he'll be able to compete with those white guys
Yeah,
applying for the same positions.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, the older I've gotten, sometimes it's not that. It's what are you bringing to the table?
Of
Or do
course.
you have a license or certification? We've talked to you guys about this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Your name could be the most complicated name, but you've got all these credentials. You're more than likely going to get a phone call.
Mhm. Definitely.
So sometimes it's not always the Eurocentric names.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, what's on your resume that
Mhm.
makes you stand out so we can call you or shoot you an email and set up interview.
Definitely. But I think we know that now because we have a little bit more resources, more
Mm-hmm.
access to information to know to have all these credentials, and we've had more black people in those positions who can refer that information, relay that information to other black people. Like, hey, you need to get your credentials, you need to get your MBA, you need to
Mm-hmm.
graduate from college to even know to be in that position in the first place to do that stuff. Um, Around the time I was born, that wasn't nearly as popular as it is now. Yeah, it was around. There's people, there's black people getting their credentials, getting their MBA, but it's not nearly the same level as there is now because there's just a little bit more information,
Mm-hmm.
more people who have gone through it and done it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when you were a first generation student, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Ex- ex- Example of that, best example of that, versus you had some of your white classmates who are second, third generation students in the 90s.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's, you see what I mean? That
Mm-hmm.
that has a hard, or a lot to play with it. But I do see what you mean by because and I do this as well. I try not to look at everything through the lens of a race, um because that can almost end up being an excuse for inaction.
Yeah.
um so it's definitely a balance, like I've definitely been experienced microaggressions that sometimes I just say, I just think they're being ignorant, or I just think they're clueless or something, just so I don't put myself in that me, like, black versus white
Yeah.
mindset.
But do you ever address it? Do you ever say, "Hey, do you realize what you just said?"
Oh yeah, yeah, if it's called for,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's important.
Like that one example I did with that one girl, that was the most
Oh,
notable.
okay.
Because that
But
was
I,
that was definitely a microaggression.
yeah.
um and I'm just like, what do you hear what you're saying? Like, really think about what you're saying. um but yeah, I think that's a great point to stop.
Okay.
Thank you for this interview, Mom.
You're welcome, sunshine.
All right.